Hello, my name is Matthew, and there's been another great discussion video going around our little corner of BookTube, which is Penguin classics that should exist. And this was started by Michael K. Vaughan, and it went viral. Everybody liked the idea, um, and videos started popping up almost immediately. I've seen a bunch of them now. I know Shawn Standfast has done one, and Drunzo, Steve Donoghue, I think, made two 4 hour long videos. And it's great fun to think about classics or favorites, maybe obscure works that should be in this famous reprinting line, the Great Penguin Classics. And I was thinking about it myself, and it's fun to dream and think about in my perfect world what would be a Penguin classic. It's aspirational. I also kind of felt like it was picking on this publishing house uh, because it is so great. And I thought instead of talking about examples of great or interesting works that have earned the reputation or merit to be a part of the Penguin Classics, instead I would just show maybe about 10 examples of Penguin Classics that do exist. And it's just amazing that they exist. It's so neat. So these aren't necessarily favorites of mine, but just when I look at it and think, that's so great that Penguin Classics went through the effort to reprint these. And the first I'll show, this was sort of the lightning rod that Michael K. Vaughan showed, which is Clarissa. And the, the argument went, if they would make something like this, why wouldn't they make other great big fat tomes? Because this is proof that it's doable. But all that is true. I just think uh, this book should be able to just be very happy that it exists at all in this way. It's amazing. A newer Penguin classic, which I think is one of the coolest. It's daring and genius that Penguin Classics would do this, which is their new Marvel series, which the argument goes that in the 20th century, comic books have staked their claim into the literary landscape. And so it's become a part of the Penguin Classic line. And they made this oversized, for Penguin Classic, oversized format, which has the black spine. And then when you open it up, it's full color. And not only is it full color, but it's the color that looks like what would be in a comic book. So it's really nice paper, it's matte, finished, and it comes with, they took it seriously. It comes with all of the critical apparatus that you would expect from Penguin Classics. It has introductions, it has other interesting things, like there's like a newspaper portion. Incredible. Another one which kind of goes to Penguin Classics making huge books, and this is the Arabian Nights, the tales of 1001 Nights, but it's the complete work. It's unabridged, and it's 3 volumes, which is absolutely massive. This is a library, a world of its own, truly with 1001 tales that are all woven and spun together. I have still not finished this entire thing, but I've read a lot of it, and it serves the having the whole of it serves it very well. It of course can be it can be abridged, but the storytelling device being wound out, and they did it. I mean, how many people are sitting down to read this whole thing today? But it's here and ready to be read and enjoyed. And then sort of a theme that I often that I've noticed with Penguin Classics. I'm going to see if I can find. I thought I had it. I'll start with the Iliad by Homer, and I only have the one example, but this is the Robert Fagles translation. Very well known, very well regarded, very readable, and it's a verse translation, so it has that look of an epic poem. But this isn't the only it's cat hair. This isn't the only edition that you can of the Iliad that you can find in the Penguin Classics lineup. I know that they definitely also have the Robert Graves translation, which is a prose translation, and I remember being intimidated, being young and wanting to read these classics and not being very familiar or comfortable or confident with myself to read poetry. And to have a publishing house that with one book will offer you two avenues. Do you feel better reading it in prose? Do you feel better reading it in verse? And they're both great. The Robert Graves translation isn't it's not a step down from the Robert Fagles translation, but two translations by one publishing house along this theme. I read, let's see, which one is it? This one. Okay, so this is the poem of the Cid, which is a Spanish epic poem, and I read this one. And when you open it up and look at it, and it has facing pages, you can see the Spanish on one side, and then the translation on the other side. And this is a literal translation. There's not much artistry that I found on the page. I still found it entertaining to read because the story is so great, but it really is just transcribing the Spanish into a very literal interpretation. Penguin also makes what they call the Song of the Cid. So this is the poem of the Cid, and then the Song of the Cid. And in this one, now again, the same work published by the same publishing house. This one's a little different. This one is in verse. And so I read the literal translation first. And then I read the verse translation. I saw this, and it was great. And I don't know why they do this, but you get two options served to you. I believe that they do the same thing for Leaves of Grass. This is the first 1855 edition, so the first edition. And I'm not positive, but I'm 90% sure that they also publish the Deathbed edition of Walt Whitman. I have a different edition, which I think is Modern Library. I do know that they have the Frankenstein. They have two versions of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein available. You can get the 1818, the original book that Mary Shelley wrote, and then the one that she revised years later, which is different. And with the same publishing house, you have an option. Which one do you want to read? Or read both and see how interesting it is that things can get changed around. Another example is the Canterbury Tales. So this is a book, an author, Chaucer, that I do spend a little bit of time with. Chaucer is this author that I want to get to know. I want to be entertained and read these stories, and I haven't broken through yet. It's not just dedicating the time. It's also there's an intimidation factor, and I often just move on to something else that is much more approachable for me to spend the little time that I have enjoying my reading. So this is the Canterbury Tales in the original Middle English. Great big book, and it's incredible. The scholarly apparatus that goes into this thing. So it's Old English. It's the words that Chaucer wrote, and then it has footnotes. So the notes that are on the bottom of the page. Every page has footnotes, and so these footnotes serve as a guiding hand as you're getting acclimated to this kind of strange, alien, oddly familiar language. It's absolutely doable to read it with a little bit of work. I find I spend more time parsing out the sentences and getting the gist of the words wrapped up in my mind that I often lose track of the larger story being told. But anyway, Penguin also has another Chaucer, the Canterbury's Tales by Chaucer, and this is the Neville Coghill translation, which is still verse, but it's modernized, and it's abridged, and this is something that can be a stepping stone. Not for me yet, but eventually I could read this and get my feet wet. And if I like it, if I enjoy it, then I have this great big book to enjoy. And Penguin just offers that to me. Let's see. I had something else. A couple other strange things. Along those lines, this is one book, but this is The Prelude by William Wordsworth. And this is a poem that Wordsworth, from what I understand, worked on and not only added to it, but tinkered with the poem for his whole life, or decades of his life, constantly went back and revised and tuned and corrupted and arguably made better or worse this poem of his life. And this is the prelude in 4 texts. So we get in one book the 1798, the 1799, the 1805, and the 1850 versions, all in one book. And what's interesting about this, and something that you can find quite often in the Penguin Classic lineup, that I don't know if I've given examples of this, which is not just reprinting a classic, but making something that's curated, an idea that an editor or a scholar, or somebody had an idea about putting something together that made it more interesting. And so this is something that's curated, but I'm showing this just as an example. The selected poems and prose of Shelley, and this is obviously a terrific on its own, but it's a collected works, and everybody knows collected works. You get a great poet, you get Lord Byron, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, and you put together a thing. You have an introduction, you have notes, and then you have something that's very common. I find this to just be a little bit more interesting just in the selection process. The fact that this exists. There was a person or people that thought having these 4 poems together in one volume that can be compared to be a novel idea. Let's see what else. I'll show 3 more, I think. And these 2 are very similar. So this is Voltaire's Philosophical Dictionary, which it's not a normal dictionary. It's a set of satirical essays that are alphabetized. But it works in the way a dictionary would work, where there's a section on faith, and then you can read Voltaire's thoughts on faith. Not the definition of faith, but Voltaire's thoughts on faith. And aside from the strangeness of this book, it has a lot of unusual qualities. It's not a novel. It's not a dictionary. It's something entirely different. But Voltaire was one of the most prolific writers of his age, and one of the most prolific writers that ever wrote. And you can't find anything in English by a major publishing house. There should be a giant, this is going back to what Penguin should do, but there should be a great big fat selected letters, a collection of letters by Voltaire, a big fat volume of his plays, a big fat volume of his tales, and on and on and on. I know in French libraries they have whole shelves, but I'm not focusing on what they don't do, but they did this one. So they have Candide, everybody has Candide, and then this strange book. Along the same lines, this is Samuel Johnson's dictionary, which has a great cover, and this is a dictionary. This is Samuel Johnson's idea of a dictionary, and it has a dictionary format. Penguin went to the trouble of having the 4 columns, double columned each page, and it may or may not have literary value. I'm not so sure about that. I think of it more of a really interesting artifact by a major literary figure, and something that was hugely influential at the time. But they went to the trouble to make this. The last book that I'll show isn't special at all. It doesn't shine a light on Penguin Classics in any peculiar way, but this is one of my favorites, and this is Salammbô by Gustave Flaubert. Beautiful cover. I have to do something about this. It's late. And the only reason that I'm showing it is Flaubert is a major figure. He only has a very small handful of novels, and aside from Madame Bovary and Sentimental Education, his other works can be a little tricky to find, and I just appreciate that I was able to get this. I don't know if there's another publishing house, a major publishing house, that has Salammbô in their lineup. I'm going to stop now and ascend to heaven. Let me know what you think about any of these books here. But these are Penguin Classics that exist, and I love that they exist. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you, and take care.